Welcome back to A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, free on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Search Locked On Sports Atlanta. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mark Zinno, MarkZinno, and follow us at Locked On ATL. Make sure you check out all the great shows that we have here on Locked On Sports Atlanta, whether it is A to Z, whether it's ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste. Don't forget about Hitting Hard with John Chuckery. Of course, Locked On Falcons, Locked On Hawks, and don't forget, of course, about our Braves postcast with the one and only next guest joining me right here on A to Z. It is Grant McAuley in the house. Grant, welcome. Good to talk to you finally, brother. And I'm glad we're back on the same team again, working in the same place.
I like it. I like it. We've worked in a few different places. This one is a very exciting one, though. We both got our own shows and stuff going on. We're building, I think, a really great following and giving sports fans of Atlanta exactly what they want, which is their team all the time.
Yeah. And you know the long list of people who want to hear A to Z on a routine basis.
I do know. I'm on that list.
All right. Big news. Ronald Acuna gets called up just a wee bit earlier than expected. I think May 6th was the initial target date, but he looks good down in AAA. Look, everybody screamed, he's ready, bring him up. And I was just like, guys, don't oversell this thing because, it's not going to change anything. 4 or 5 more days isn't going to be the issue. But, there was so much about having to go through the rigors of, travel and then rehab, playing a full game, playing a day game after a night game. All those reps were the things that they were trying to figure out how his body and his knee were going to react, which is, I think, why the process took a little bit longer. And furthermore, oh, by the way, you had to make a corresponding move to get rid of somebody, which always isn't easy because some of these guys have limited number of options that you can get rid of. So all that, comes to fruition. Nonetheless, we get Ronald Acuna back and excitement is abound.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of excitement about this because when you get one of the best players in baseball back, it's going to have a big influence on what your lineup does. I think it can have an impact moving forward on what this outfield defense is going to be because that's been pretty questionable early in the year. A weakness that you knew without Ronald was going to be there, but I just didn't necessarily expect it to be as blatant as it has been over the first 3 weeks of the season. But as far as the rehab timetable was concerned, I always felt like, yeah, they can say May 6th, but if he's not back by that Mets series to start the month of May, I was going to be a little bit surprised. I'm still kind of surprised that he's coming back for the finale against the Cubs. But, you give him a little bit of an opportunity to continue to knock the rust off, continue to get those reps, continue to kind of, feel what it is to play every single day, which is what Major League Baseball asks of you. And particularly because I think the Braves are going to try to, manage the workload as much as they can with some spots in DH and some starts in right field and the occasional off day, especially for day games after night games. But I think that giving Ronald this 4 or so game run to get ready for that Mets series is also a pretty smart move because at this point, you've seen him for a week or so in AAA. He does feel good. He's been up to the task. His timing looks good. He's drawing his walks. He's stealing bases. He's doing the kind of stuff that Ronald Acuna Jr. does, and that will only make the Braves better in the lineup, in the field, and hopefully in the standings.
Grant, you mentioned the lead up to the Mets series, and I don't look. I tried to tell people stop panicking for the last 2 weeks. I mean, there's just so much ridiculousness between sports talk hosts in this city screaming about it, this, that, and the other, and so they're 5 games back in the Mets. I'm like, dude, the Mets are playing 700 baseball. That's not going to continue.
Yeah,
the Mets will come back to the pack, not because they're the Mets. Well, it's fun to say because of the Mets, but in general, they'll come back to the back because nobody plays 700 baseball for an extended period of time. Like there's going to be a stretch where the Mets are going to lose 12 out of 18 games and you're going to be able to make up ground. So I wasn't worried about it. But that said, because there is a little bit of a gap game wise, was any of that gamesmanship about facing the Mets and having Acuna like a better version of Acuna than the first game back? Like if it was only a 2-game difference, are we seeing Ronald Acuna back against the Mets series if they were only trailing the Mets by 2 games?
I don't think they're really looking at the standings too much, but more so like this is that opportunity to have these interdivisional games, which are very valuable because quite obviously when the Braves and Mets go head to head, that can mean a game in the standings for, either side. If they split a 4-game series, well, it doesn't mean much at the end of the 4 days other than 4 days got ripped off the calendar. You don't have those again later, but there's some importance to this series because look, I mean, you can win a division by 3 or 4 games by having a hot second half, and the Braves have shown us they can do that, but you can also lose a division by, digging yourself into too big of a hole early on. And I'm certainly not saying the Braves are there yet, but getting Ronald back, having him in tow for a big showdown like you're having with the New York Mets, who, by the way, do look better across the board. They did spend a lot of money. They did get some very good baseball players, and they have a manager who I think is a bit more up to the task of leading the kind of club that they want to have up there in New York. There's a lot of different factors that would lead me to believe that this Mets team is a little bit different, and they're accomplishing all of this without Jacob deGrom thus far. So some very interesting things for me that I look at that make this year's Mets club a little bit different than previous Mets club, but when it or Mets clubs. But when it comes to the Braves and Mets, having Ronald Acuna Jr. back, I think gives this club a little bit more energy, a little bit more thump, a little bit more of a whole bunch of things that the Braves haven't really shown over the first 3 weeks. It just hasn't been consistent baseball, particularly on the offensive side.
Well, again, I would remind Braves fans a reference to the Mets. One, they're the Mets. Two, Buck Showalter has never actually won anything. He's great at turning teams around and getting into the playoffs, but he's never actually won anything. I don't say it as a knock because I like Buck. I covered him in Baltimore for years. So he's a great dude, but it is the Mets, so I wouldn't worry too much.
But I do think he's a good transitional kind of manager for them. Is the worst. If they get a better guy later, that's fine. But this is a guy who does know how to win in the course of the regular season, and we'll see if he's able to do that in terms of what he can elevate the Mets to from a club that had this division sewn up, it felt like, heading into the All-Star break last year, and then fell flat on its face. They can't really afford to do that kind of thing and spend $250 million on their payroll.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the lineup, because the only observation, and I said this on A to Z as we got launched right after, April 1st and had the first couple of weeks or first couple of days of the season under our belt shortly thereafter. My only observation after the first, week of baseball was two things. One, I thought the strikeouts were a little bit high. Yeah. I hope to see them come down from the team offensive standpoint, a lot of strikeouts, and that's starting to come back to the pack a little bit. But two, the other thing was the leadoff spot. Rosario struggled from day one. Now, we know clearly now he's had a problem like, seeing in general, which is always hard to hit a baseball when you can't see.
Makes it hard, yeah.
It's a little more difficult than normal. But that said, Ronald at the back of the top of the lineup obviously is going to table set. I mean, look, if you had Ronald Acuna with Matt Olson tearing the cover off the ball for the first 14 games, they might have a completely different record just because Ronald would be on base more. And I think that's really the hope that this lineup, which is built from the top down, unlike a lot of other lineups in Major League Baseball, which are now built from the middle out, but the Braves are sort of traditional in that sense, with the top of their lineup being their strength. I expect to see a quick sort of little jolt in the offense, no?
Yeah, no, there's an explosiveness that this Braves lineup has with Ronald Acuna Jr. at the top, because he's a guy that can open up the game with a bang, and he is your best hitter. I want him having the most plate appearances of anybody on this team, and that's kind of why I look at it maybe where traditional guys would say, oh, well, Matt Olson needs to have a bunch of runners on base before he comes up, and that would be great, but that also is kind of the job of the bottom of the lineup to perform a little bit better. But when it comes to how many at-bats and how many plate appearances my best hitters are going to get, let me stack them up at the top. And then hopefully the back end of the lineup, the bottom of the lineup, will start to perform a little bit more up to norms, because that has not been the case. The Braves 7, 8, 9 hitters overall, like the composite numbers, have been pretty bad. I would say probably about as bad as you'll find across the National League and maybe all of baseball if you go track it all down for all 30 clubs. But Ronald Acuna Jr., Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Marcell Ozuna, Ozzie Albies, and Travis d'Arnaud, 1 through 6, I think that's going to be pretty powerful. And if Duvall starts to get it figured out, if you get something out of Travis Demerit for a little while that, excites you, and you have him up and in the mix, and then of course Dansby Swanson is off to just a very slow start with a lot of strikeouts, but he's been a streaky player. But he showed again on Wednesday that when the big moment comes around, he's a guy that's going to deliver you a few hits and a few of those throughout the year too. So I think it's a great group overall, but you're right. At the top of the order, you can make it an explosive start, and you get Ronald up to the plate as many times as you possibly can in a game. That is nothing but a good thing.
Grant, let's take one quick look at the pitching in general. Look, the bullpen has been the strength, right? We've seen them do what they're supposed to do to this point. How are you grading the starting pitching? Ian Anderson has been a head scratcher at this point, especially with his 2 home starts being as bad, considering how good he has been at home throughout his entire career. Kyle Wright has been good. You get Bryson Elder, and what is he? I mean, we have the 6-man rotation. One, should they go back to the 5-man rotation now that we're a little bit deeper and pitchers are a little bit more stretched out? And what do we make of the starting rotation so far?
I think they're going to go back to the 5-man rotation very soon. There is that
Who's
double
the odd man out
inside of that New York series. I mean, right now, if you're asking me who the Braves' best 5 starting pitchers are that I think they're going to go to the post with, it's going to be Max Fried. It's going to be Charlie Morton. I know he's struggling. It's going to be Ian Anderson, who's been kind of up and down. Kyle Wright has really been the savior of the staff. He has looked outstanding. And then I think at that 5th spot right now, it's kind of Bryce Elder's to lose, but the walks have been a little bit alarming for me for him the last couple of outings. That's not really something that he was doing a lot of in AAA, especially when he was dialed in. But there could be more opportunity for guys, whether it's Tucker Davidson, whether we see Huascar Ynoa again at some point. He had his own things to figure out, or Kyle Muller or Tuki Toussaint. There's a lot of guys that you can mess with in that fifth spot or use if you do need to give everybody a day throughout the course of the season. But it's, you really got to get Charlie Morton on track. I think that's really what's holding the Braves back right now. Is he had a pretty good outing his first time, and you thought, hey, Charlie Morton looks like he's back. And the last three have kind of devolved into levels of, I think that he's kind of fighting himself a little bit on the mound to get back to where he was, because he finished 2021 on a very good run. And the only thing that really set him back was the fact he broke his leg in the World Series. I don't think that physically that's so much a problem, but I think mentally, and maybe for some feel stuff and maybe some slight mechanical things, Charlie Morton is still kind of trying to reestablish himself after a long layoff, a short spring training. There's a lot of different things in there, but he hasn't made a lot of excuses other than saying, look, I'm letting the team down every fifth day and I got to figure this out.
Any concerns about Ian Anderson at this point?
Not really. I think that the big thing with him is going to be fastball command. I think you can tell a lot about Ian Anderson by where he's locating his fastball in the first inning or two of the games. If he's missing consistently up and out of the zone, it's a non-competitive pitch. And even with an 80 grade changeup, which I believe he has, one of the best changeups that any young pitcher can have, it's not going to entice the hitters to get out of the strike zone because you're not ahead, 0-1, 0-2, 1-2. You're not in the count where you can really utilize your other weapons. Maybe leaning a little bit more on his breaking ball as well, and doing a little bit of what Kyle Wright's doing, where he's just pounding the strike zone with fastballs. Then he's using his breaking ball. Anderson's weapons more so the changeup, but you've got to be able to, consistently command it. And that to me has been when Ian Anderson's been at his best. And when you watch these starts where he's at 70 pitches after 3 innings, you pretty much know what's wrong, is he's just out of the strike zone and hitters are waiting him out. And when they wait him out, he ends up out of the game a lot earlier than Brian Snitker and the Braves would like.
He is Grant McAuley. Make sure you guys check out the Braves postcast after every single Braves game right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Everything else Braves related, Grant, the floor is yours. Where else can they find you?
Well, you can find me obviously on the Locked On Braves postcast. You can also find me over on Battery Power on SB Nation. Corey McCartney and I are doing a great show over there. I've got my show From the Diamond, which I'm going to be making a big announcement about here ever so soon. And of course, 11 Alive Sports and a lot of other places. Just check me out on Twitter. You'll find all the links, all the videos, all the audio, all the things at Grant McAuley is where you can find me.
All right, brother. Well, you and I will catch up soon on the outside for a beer and a slice or whatever. Great to talk to you. It's always great to see you again. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
All right. That'll do it for us here on A to Z. Thank you guys for making A to Z your first listen every single day. Don't forget to check out ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste, and also Hitting Hard with John Chuckery every day right here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Free on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you search Locked On Sports Atlanta. Enjoy the draft tonight. We'll talk to you tomorrow right here on A to Z. Have a great day. Don't take any crap from anybody. See you.